We are anonymous. We track the noise, filter the facts, and refuse to bow to anyone's talking points. If you came for propaganda, you will be disappointed. If you came for clarity, focus now. Tonight we speak about Donald Trump. We speak about Jeffrey Epstein. We speak about Ghislaine Maxwell. We speak about Prince Andrew. We speak about Alex Acosta. We speak about Mike Johnson. We speak about the banks, about settlements, about process, about how power protects itself, and about how truth slips through the smallest gaps unless you hold the light on it without blinking. Breathe. The ground under this story is not rumor. The ground begins with charges, trials, judgments, and public records. Jeffrey Epstein was charged in federal court. The indictment laid out a pattern of exploitation. The dates, the places, the methods. The case ended not with a verdict, but with a death in custody. The records remain. The victim statements remain. The paper trail remains. The questions remain. You cannot erase lines once they are inked into the public record, no matter how often spin doctors try to sand them down. Ghislaine Maxwell is not a whisper. Ghislaine Maxwell is a conviction. She was found guilty by a jury. She received a long sentence. The court did not accept the comfortable story. The court accepted evidence, testimony, and the logic of facts. When we speak the name Ghislaine Maxwell, we are not speculating. We are pointing to a judgment stamped with the weight of the system itself. No slogans, no chants. A docket, a transcript, a sentence. That is the spine of this chapter. That is where the argument stands when the microphones are shut off. Prince Andrew stepped back from public duties after a civil settlement with Virginia Giuffre. The palace stripped the HRH styling and removed affiliations. That too is a matter of record. You cannot litigate optics into existence when formal announcements have already been made. In a different era, a royal title might have absorbed the blow. Not now. Not with this case. When we speak about Prince Andrew, we mark the line between criminal convictions and civil arrangements. We mark the line between denial and consequence. We mark the line between ceremony and accountability. Now walk the money. You will hear J.P. Morgan. You will hear settlements. You will hear numbers with more zeros than most people will see in a lifetime. Those are not rumors. Those are signed agreements. Why would an institution pay that much? Because litigation risk is real. Because discovery is heavy. Because reputational damage compounds faster than interest. You do not need a conspiracy theory when you have a spreadsheet, a consent order, and a check that clears. Follow the filings. Follow the board minutes. Follow the risk committee. Follow the incentives. Alex Acosta is not just a name from a headline. Alex Acosta is the prosecutor whose office cut a non-prosecution agreement years before the federal case that came later. Oversight bodies reviewed how that decision was made. Words like poor judgment entered the record. Not a meme, not a thread. A formal assessment of how a powerful office exercised power poorly. When we speak of Alex Acosta, we are not pointing at a shadow on the wall. We are pointing at a document with letterhead. We are pointing at an ethical autopsy of a decision that bent the arc the wrong way. Now we arrive at Donald Trump. The conversation gets louder. The footage gets grainier. The claims get hotter. We do not run from the name. We say the name, Donald Trump. We acknowledge what is verified. We separate what is alleged. We do not repeat lurid descriptions as if they are findings of fact. If there are videos of parties, they remain videos of parties. Unless, and until a court says otherwise, if there are statements about behavior, they remain statements, not verdicts. Precision is not weakness. Precision is the only way the truth can survive contact with a storm. We also speak about the reality that surrounds Donald Trump right now. Polling is a snapshot, not a destiny, but snapshots can still reveal a pattern. Younger voters have grown more skeptical. Approval is soft among the under 30 cohort. Disapproval is high. You do not need to like polls to learn from them. You only need to ask why the youngest voters are looking for steadier hands and clearer answers. It is not about hashtags. It is about lived experience with debt, housing, healthcare, climate, and basic trust in institutions that too often choose theater over service. What about Mike Johnson? The speaker's gavel is not a shield. The speaker's gavel is a lens. When Mike Johnson delays, deflects, or cites precedent, the public has the right to ask for the rule, the page, the paragraph, the timestamp. Allegations that Mike Johnson stalls to keep certain records out of reach are still allegations. But process is not a technicality. Process is the architecture of democracy. If the building is sound, open the doors. Swear in members without games. Put the votes on the floor. Publish what can be published. Let sunlight prove the house stands. We are not naive about how narratives are built. You do not need to invent anything to make this story dramatic. The known facts are dramatic enough. Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction, Prince Andrew's retreat, J.P. Morgan's settlements, Alex Acosta's professional review, the atmosphere around Donald Trump, the procedural fights under Mike Johnson. The connective tissue is not gossip. The connective tissue is the way power flows through private jets, private banks, private islands, private clubs, and public offices, and how different those words sound until you realize they share the same doors. Respect the victims. Say their names carefully. Do not turn their pain into a prop. When we speak about Virginia Giuffre, we speak with precision. When we speak about other survivors, we do not sensationalize their testimony. Trauma is not B-roll. Trauma is not a song cue. Trauma is not a hook to juice a clip. If your outrage depends on graphic detail, you have already left the path. Justice depends on clarity, not shock. It depends on steady hands, steady words, and steady focus on what can be proved and what can be done next. Release the files is a powerful demand, but it must be paired with a plan. What files exactly? Which custodians? Which date ranges? Which privilege reviews? Which redaction protocols? Which public interest tests? When you ask the Department of Justice for production, define the scope. When you ask banks for suspicious activity reports, define the filters. When you ask a committee for subpoenas, define the predicates. Mike Johnson should answer process with process. Donald Trump should answer questions with facts. Institutions should answer with documents, not slogans. Here is how you keep your balance in a storm. Number 1. Anchor to what has been verified in court. Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell. Settlements, judgments, orders. Number 2. Label allegations as allegations. Even if you believe them, even if they fit your model is not the law. Number 3, demand procedures and timelines from Mike Johnson, from committees, from agencies, from banks, timestamps, not vibes. Number 4, protect the dignity of survivors. The camera is not more important than the person. The clip is not more important than the truth. The question always returns to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump pulls the camera like gravity. That is not an endorsement. That is a description of mass. The way forward is not to chant louder. It is to ask clearer questions. What does Donald Trump know, and when did he know it? Where does Donald Trump's denial meet a record? What does Donald Trump propose in writing? About transparency, about process, about reforming. The very structures that failed here, you cannot posture your way through those questions. You either supply answers or the silence writes its own story. Alex Acosta is a warning. If a single deal can warp an arc of accountability for years, then the fix is not just outrage. The fix is structural. How should non-prosecution agreements be reviewed? What should victims be told, when, and by whom? What triggers mandatory federal oversight? What logs must be kept? What disclosure should be automatic if certain dollar thresholds move through certain institutions linked to certain names? Policy is not glamorous. Policy is a clean room. In a clean room, you can build machines that do not fail the moment pressure rises. Mike Johnson is a test. If the speaker truly believes precedent justifies delay, then show the precedent. Show past dates. Show pages. Show identical cases. Once again, timestamps, not tribunes. If precedent exists, sunlight will only strengthen the position. If precedent does not exist, sunlight will bleach the talking point. The same rule goes for every member repeating the same phrase into a camera. Do not say we are following the rules. Show the rule. Quote the rule. Publish the rule. Then schedule the vote and let elected representatives do their work on the record. Prince Andrew is a lesson about consequence without a criminal trial. Titles can be adjusted. Duties can be removed. Reputation can be reduced to a single tight frame. A palace can act because a palace is a hierarchy. A republic must act by law. That is slower, but it is stronger when it lands. Do not envy the speed of monarchy. Invest in the stamina of due process. That is how your victory does not evaporate at the first appeal. That is how your win does not depend on a single headline or a single host's monologue. J.P. Morgan is a lesson about institutional learning. Risk systems are built by humans. Humans miss patterns. Humans rationalize exceptions. Humans get lulled by profitable clients. Then the bill comes due. The post-mortem is not a spectacle. It is a blueprint. What alerts failed, what escalations stalled, what committees waved a client through because the client was rich and connected. The fix is boring, more independence, stronger audit, clearer escalation paths, fewer conflicts, tighter incentives. The boring fix is how you keep the next case from reaching the same scale. We will now say the names again because repetition is a kind of oath. Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Prince Andrew, Alex Acosta, Mike Johnson. You do not fight fog with fog. You fight fog with a beam. You do not fight noise with more noise. You fight noise with notes, dates, filings, transcripts, bank wires, calendars, sworn statements, and logs. If you cannot hold those in your hand, you cannot hold the truth for long. If you cannot footnote a claim, you cannot stand on it when the ground shakes. To the survivors watching this, we see you. To the people who loved those who did not survive, we say their absence out loud. To the cynics who shrug and say nothing changes, we disagree. People change systems when they learn to ask better questions and demand better answers. The arc does not bend by itself. It bends when courts do their work. It bends when committees do their oversight. It bends when banks fix their controls. It bends when voters punish bad process and reward honesty, even when honesty hurts in the short term. Here is your checklist for after this video ends. Save the indictments and judgments in a folder you can open quickly. Save the settlement agreements. Save the oversight reports. Save the committee letters. When someone says everyone knows, ask them for a document. When someone says it is all a distraction, ask them for a timeline. When someone says we released the files, ask for a link, a page count, and a search index. If they cannot supply them, do not supply them your trust. Trust is not a participation trophy. Trust is earned one document at a time. We close where we began, with names and with light. Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Prince Andrew, Alex Acosta, Mike Johnson. We do not kneel. We do not whisper. We do not pretend allegations are verdicts. We do not pretend verdicts are rumors. We hold the two apart with a steady hand so the survivors are not used, and the accused are not absolved, and the powerful are not allowed to hide behind confusion. If the files can be lawfully released, release them. If the procedures can be accelerated without breaking the rules, accelerate them. We are anonymous. We do not forgive the manipulation of process. We do not forget the names. Expect us to keep asking. Expect us to keep reading. Expect us to keep knocking on the same doors, with the same questions until the hinges get replaced. If you believe justice needs light, subscribe and share. Leave the one document you want surfaced next. Demand that Donald Trump answer with records, not rhetoric. Demand that Mike Johnson answer with precedent, not posture. Demand that Alex Acosta's chapter teach prosecutors a new standard. Demand that institutions act like guardians, not chaperones for wealth.